to everyone. Welcome to our 11th edition of the MasterDrive Colloquium. We can't believe that it's 2 years ago that we had the national state of disaster declared, and together we've walked an incredible journey. All of us here, our friends, customers, and a number of other people. The colloquiums that we started, as we indicated, is the 11th one, and you've seen that in the preamble, has spoken to matters that touch people's hearts. It has to do with loss of life, loss of loved ones, how to deal with grief. But there are many more positive things that we can talk about, and a chance encounter a while ago has led us here, where we decided to talk about things that were important to road users. Traditionally, it's always been thought that there's three categories of road users. They are pedestrian, cyclists, and motorists. And yet, a few years ago, chatting with EWT, and we have Wendy Collinson here, that's going to share some insights from a nature perspective on road use by animals, led me certainly to the conclusion that there's a fourth category, and that is animals. And maybe we don't care enough to demonstrate to them as drivers of vehicles that we can share the road with them responsibly. You could, as it were, say that we have a duty of care toward these animals that have been entrusted to us. So today, the theme of our discussion, as you've seen, traveling with pets, how to make it safe. We've really got some brilliant people here today. And if I can just run through the speaker lineup, we've got a veterinary surgeon. He's going to be talking about minimizing stress when we travel with vehicles. All of us at some stage, and with the opportunity of commuting now, we may have a pet with us, whether it's a dog or a cat or something. So let's have a look and listen to Morné chat to us about that. Vehicle training for pets, Karin Pienaar, a behavioral specialist, but I'm sure some of the principles will easily address some of us as humans as well. Wendy is going to talk about drivers engaging with wildlife. Some of the actions that we take as drivers, thinking that they're absolutely innocent, we hope to talk to those, and let's see maybe our behavior change as well. And then the one that I found very interesting, we formed a partnership with the Guide Dog for Blind Association, because it's them that in many instances are training these animals to interact with traffic. And Mandla Ndlovu, who's the head of training, will be talking to that. And another interesting thing is that Kirby is the training director for MasterDrive, so if he happens to sell, please excuse him. He's a paramedic in his spare time, and he's attended scenes of accidents where animals have been involved. I don't know how you feel about that, but it could be quite traumatic. So we'll be sharing those with you, but please let's not forget about the host of prizes that have been sponsored over a period of time. Some really interesting ones we carry over from last year. The value from the International Diploma in Logistics and Transport, it's 34,000 Rand worth of a prize. There's a gift voucher from Cope. There's, of course, always some nice driving experiences from MasterDrive. There's Rogues hamper from Pet Clinic. We've got tickets to the Guide Dog Association open day, and then an opportunity of spending time with them when they train the vehicle. So, guys, I really think we've got a brilliant day. But before I just hand over to our first speaker, which is going to be Morné, I'd like you to just reflect for a moment on all the things that we have covered. Something really important in our next colloquium will be an international event again. We're talking about awarding fleet safety awards. Amongst us, we've got people who manage fleets, and we would like to recognize those individuals and companies with something really special for the work that they do in keeping our roads safe. So the program, we will introduce the speakers. Afterwards, we'll have Q&A, and then we'll hand out the prizes. So Morné, if you'd like to join us, please, and let's hear you talk about minimizing stress for animals that we travel with. Morné, can we pick the one behind you?
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Good. I'm just quickly sharing my screen. No, can't yet. Sorry, Eugene, I can't share my screen yet.
Okay, let's Nishani will sort that out, and if necessary, we'll put yours on from our side.
That's fine.
But don't worry, it's very relaxed, Morné. Don't get stressed. Just pet the tiger behind you, and everybody will be happy.
I'll move a bit sideways. He's got to put.
And in case anybody thinks I don't know my animals, please, I know it's not a tiger. Right? So just if anybody makes a comment, please be aware of that.
Here we go.
Are you able to share my Morné?
Yes, I can. Perfect. Thank you very much. Right. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for this brilliant opportunity to be able to chat to everybody today. And I think this is something, a topic that's quite close to my heart and something that we actually see very often and in our everyday practice. So I think it's really great that one can actually talk about this topic, because I think the reality with our pets these days is that I think we can safely say that most pets will, at some point in their lives, have to travel. Whether this is going on outings, because we know that these days our pets are often moving into a position of the family where they are actually part of the family. They're not just a dog or a cat that's just around. They're actually becoming part of the family. They are taken on holidays. When people travel overseas, when people immigrate, they go with. So pet traveling has become quite common. It's become an everyday occurrence. We have pets that go to daycare every day because they might be stressed at home, or they might just be a little dog that is maybe not safe to be by himself at home. And then finally, the big thing is, yes, most pets do at some point visit us as vets. And to be honest, it's not nice receiving a pet and knowing that they've been super stressed in the car, or you can see this little kitty cat that has just been sort of shoved very unceremoniously into the cat box, and you know they hate it and they can't stand it. And it is definitely something that if we can avoid these sort of stresses, it is really nice to be able to do that. So yeah, today we're just going to quickly chat about the various ways that can be done and some of the things we need to take into consideration. So the first thing for me is, of course, safety when it comes to when you're actually traveling with your pet. And I think the most important of that is that pets should be restrained in some way. It's really good to have cats in baskets if they're not used to traveling. Yes, you get your cat that loves to just sort of park off on the back seat and they're lying there on their backs and they're not stressed at all. That's the ideal, but the reality is a lot of cats don't like that. So it is better to put them in a smaller area like a basket, covered basket maybe, and in that way they can feel a lot more secure. And then dogs, of course, it's good that you can somehow be able to control them, so a harness or a collar is good. Of course, if you're traveling very far, we're talking about now cross-country traveling, by all means, maybe just a collar is fine. You don't have to have a lead. You don't have to necessarily have the whole patoot on the whole time, but there must be some way that we can actually get hold of them if something should happen. It's also really important, obviously, to not have them on the driver's seat. You need to be in control of your vehicle. Don't put them on the driver's seat. I also actually advise don't put them even in the front seat on the other side, in the passenger seat. Rather put them in the back if you can. And very important, and we have had so many injuries from pets jumping out of windows, jumping off buckies. Please be careful when you open windows. We all have the picture in our heads of the dog sitting with his head outside, with the tongue flapping in the wind. And they really do enjoy having a bit of wind in their hair, which is fine, but just make sure they can't get out. Make sure there's a way that they are being restrained. It's not nice having a little doggy come in that's either been run over by a car or that's jumped out and broken his leg, and it's something that could have been avoided. So that's quite an important thing to remember. And then, of course, there's a lot of pets that travel all over the country and that travel long distances as well. It's not necessarily just a quick stop to the beach or to the park. So on these long journeys, make sure that you cater for your pets as well. We're talking here about and thinking things like comfort, make sure they've got enough space, that they can lie down, that they can maybe move around a bit. Stop often, make sure that they can get out and stretch their legs a bit, just like you get a bit cramped and sore from traveling far. By all means, dogs and cats also do if they're just lying or sitting in the same position the whole time. So it's really good. Stop often, give them a bit of a sniff, make sure that they have a bit of time to move around. They can maybe have a lap of water or two. So that's also really important. And then finally, it's good to have some emergency contacts of some sort with you. So if you are, for instance, if there is an incident where you are in an accident or something like that, it's good that someone can at least get hold of an emergency contact for your pets. If it's a pet sitter or even your pet's medical records, maybe the vet. If your pet has got any actual illnesses that is important and that we need to take into consideration when treating these pets, it's good that there's some way that we can find out if there are any pressing matters that needs to be taken into account if a pet like that should be rescued or brought in after an accident. Now, it's also very important to look at health checks before you're traveling. Now, whether this is just locally in your parks or beach or whatever, it's nice. We live in the Cape, so we've got the beach right here. But this goes for pretty much anywhere where you go, is to ensure that you've got tick and flea cover. Ticks are our biggest problem, actually, because they can transmit biliary and a tick bite fever. Both of those diseases are pretty common through the whole country. And making sure that your pets are covered is a really, really good thing to do. Also, vaccinations, especially rabies vaccinations, are actually required by law. So it's really good to make sure that they are vaccinated adequately, and especially if our pets are often exposed to different environments. Vaccines really help us to prevent these diseases. And then health checks for pets, especially if they've got underlying issues like heart disease or respiratory disease, we need to take these things into account. Make sure you've got their medications if they've got chronic medications. Make sure you've got enough for your travels if you are going far and staying for long. Our heart disease patients, they can actually get, you can get worsening of their symptoms if they get super excited or very stressed for a long time. They're very prone to heat stress, the same as with our cats with asthma. And we can actually get them in an emergency situation because of this heat stress. So watch out that the car's not too hot inside. Don't leave them in the hot car. Make sure there's enough ventilation. And then just watch the older pets with arthritis, our big Labradors. It's sometimes hard to get in and out, especially if you've now been lying there for a while. So just make sure that you think of those things, that you can help them in and out. And make sure you have a vehicle that you can transport your pet. If you've got a huge Great Dane, make sure that you can actually get the Great Dane in the car, or have some sort or some way of being able to move them around if you should need. So our two main medical problems that we're often dealing with when it comes to pet traveling is motion sickness and pets that are nervous or anxious. Those are the two broad classifications. And I think these are the two things that we can actually do things about. And both of these things actually have an impact directly on our pets as well as on ourselves. And I actually have my own little dog, you'll see him in a sec, he is a little bit nervous when he travels in the car, and he gets motion sickness as well. So I know how stressful it is for him because I can see that he doesn't like it. And I know how horrible it is for me to feel that he is going in this situation and he doesn't really like it. So, and then he vomits and it's all horrible. So it's really, these are the two things that we know can directly impact our relationship with our pets while we travel. So firstly, your patients that are motion sickness, or get car sick, they will be licking their lips. You'll see a lot of swallowing. They can gag, they can actually vomit themselves. But very often after they've done that, they would actually go and relax. The vomiting episode is often just once off. They'll chill out after that and it won't be a problem anymore. Where our nervous or anxious patients would be more, they'll be restless, they'll be vocalizing, they'll be very excited, or they'll just sit there in a little ball shivering, or they'll just be frozen with their eyes huge and the ears pulled back. And it's like they sit like that for the whole journey until they eventually get out. So those are two of the things that we often look out for. So this is my little pooch. His name's Darby, and you can see here his eyes are all big. You can see the whites of his eyes coming out. His posture is quite withdrawn. His body is pulled low down. Ears are back. We can see he's not very happy. We do normally like short trips with him. In general, we try and avoid the super long ones without dealing with it more directly. So if we start dealing with these problems and motion sickness in particular, the first thing we always advise is to start getting pets used to the car. And I think there is a presentation about this later, so I'm not actually going to spend too much time on that. But the best thing is from young, get them used to the car. You can also avoid feeding them for about 3 hours afterwards. It doesn't necessarily take the sensation of nausea away, but it's a bit less to clean up. There'll be less vomiting itself. So we do find that it does help a lot. Pets that are nauseous and that are prone to vomiting will be it will be much more exaggerated if the stomach is full. And then it's also very, very important. Please come ask us as vets for help. There's so much we can do for pets that do actually get sick when they're in a car. There's actual very, very safe medication that can be used to stop the vomiting. It stops the sensation of even feeling nauseous. And it can also often facilitate them from getting used to the car, because if you've got a patient that gets nauseous whenever they go into a car, you can very often actually get them to become very stressed, and there's a stress association with the car. So it's really good to rather use something to help them. Now, unfortunately, these medications are scheduled, so you're going to have to chat to your vet. The over-the-counter things don't work, but please reach out for some help because we really do want to do that. Now, when we're talking about our pets that are very nervous or anxious, again, we start with getting them used to the car. And this can be a slow process. Take it slow, don't rush it. And you really want to get them used to it. You want to get them comfortable in it. And that goes for cats as well. We so often just think, travel in the car, dogs. Put the dog in the car, here we go. But we forget how anxious cats can be because they don't necessarily vocalize and freak out like dogs would. We're not always necessarily aware of how stressed they are. But cats can get extremely stressed. So it's very important to remember them as well. So this is a cat that was a patient of mine, and he had to travel to us very often. And when we started with him, he was extremely anxious when we put him in the car. So we started with a very slow process. And we started by just literally putting a box in the middle of the hospital. And he just loved getting in this box. And he was super chilled. We eventually moved the box to the car. Then he started getting to the car, in the box, lying there, chilled. And so we got him used to the car slowly. And it really makes a huge difference. And you can see in his body behavior, he's so chilled. He used to sleep in the box on his back. He hardly ever went into a cage anymore because he was so calm. And it all started with just getting him used to the fact that he's going to be moving. You can also start after a box or something like that, move the cat over onto the actual carrier that they'll be going into the car with. You make the carrier such a nice place, and nice bedding in there. You can feed them in there. You can put some treats in there. There's all sorts of things that you can do to make it a part of their normal places that they can go to. And that is what brings us, it gives us that final breakthrough with them. And then also make the car a fun place. Don't always just take them to the vet. It's not nice always going to the vet. So make it a nice place to go to. This is incidentally my own dog. And he loves to get into the car. He used to go, he knows he's going on an outing, or you can see he's relaxed, he's excited, mouth's open, he looks around. So make it a fun place. And then, as I mentioned before, treat motion sickness because it can increase your anxiety a lot. Now, there are two types of medications that we can use for anxiety in pets. So firstly, there are a whole lot of natural products that we can use, and these come in tablet forms or capsules. It's an amino acid that basically increases the serotonin, which is your feel-good hormones. You also get collars and sprays that contain pheromones. This works really well for cats as well. And it just creates a little bit more of a calming feeling in the pet when they get into the car. And of course, then they eventually create a positive association with the car. So they feel good when they're there. It has a calming effect, but I generally find this only works really well if it's quite mild anxiety. They're not that nervous, but they are a bit. That's the sort of thing we would often do. And it is over the counter, freely available, and it's very safe. So it's definitely somewhere where we can start. But as I mentioned, for the severe anxiety, often we have to do a little bit more. And that's where it comes to actual prescription medication. There's a host of them on the market. It depends on the patient, on the length of the journey, the reason for it. All of those things do play a role in what we would use. And these medications directly affect the brain, and it relieves anxiety. We don't really want to sedate patients that have to travel. Some sedations actually can make it worse. And we don't want pets, for instance, if they're in a car or on a plane, they need to be able to brace. That car is moving, so you want them to be able to keep their footing while they're busy traveling. And some of these medications can be very fast acting, and we definitely rather advise these when we get to moderate or severe anxiety. Now, these all need prescriptions from a vet. You need a health check before we can give these. So please reach out so that we can help with these medications. They do make a huge difference. And these medications are really safe. They're not habit forming. They can make a huge difference. Again, helping with the acclimatization phase, helping with those positive associations with the car. And over time, we find that we need less and less of these interventions as the pets get used to traveling. So those are the things we can do to directly help our pets when we're traveling with them. So as a final thing, we can see this is actually a cat that stays at my wife's practice. And you can see he's just parking off in the car on the backrest. He's so used to traveling. He's actually a very roamy cat. He likes to walk around. He doesn't like to be confined, but when you pop him in the car, he jumps up on the back there and he literally just wants to looks around and then just falls asleep. And that's what we want. That's the ultimate goal. And we want to try and get there without all these interventions. And that's why we strongly advise from the start, get them used to it. But we don't often have that luxury. We might have a pet that's been adopted, that's already nervous, and we can then rather go on into helping them and then hopefully get there where they can be nice and relaxed. And I think, again, all pets will likely have to travel at some point. It's really important to be prepared. And then if you see a problem, if you see your pet is nervous or vomits in the car, please reach out to us as vets. We do want to actually help. We've often also got behaviorists that we often work with, and we can give advice on how to get them used to it. But we really are a profession that's passionate about pets, and we want to help and make sure that our pets live the happiest and healthy lives that they can, and that they can enjoy all these things with their owners and with you as well.
Morné, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a heads up. There's a question, and I'll just tell you can think about it. I don't want to field it now. The question is, what about humans who give their pets human medication? So just reflect on that. When we do the Q&A, we'd like you to field that and anything else that's out there. Just a reminder to everyone, Morné and the rest of the team will stay on for questions at the end. So please, thank you for being here. I know it's just going to build one on top of the other, so please don't run away. See you shortly. Now we'd like to visit Karin Pienaar, our pet behavioralist. So I hope I got that pronunciation right. Karin, I know, and I've heard some of the things that you're going to share. So please, I would like to hand this stage to you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and you can see my screen. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I am going to be talking to you about traveling from a behaviorist's perspective. I'm going to be building on some of the things that Morné was sharing with us, but my information is going to be a lot about how to help your pets, particularly dogs and cats, how to get them ready for travel, how to help them, how to keep them safe, and all of those kinds of things. So the first thing that I'm going to chat about, just very briefly, just remember, when you are looking at dogs and cats, they have different responses to different things. And unfortunately, most pets are not born ready to travel. They're not happy necessarily if they're not given any kind of preparation for it. And it is not something that comes naturally to them. So for us as behaviorists, it's important that they're acclimatized to traveling from a very early age. There are certain window periods during which this can happen. Preferably with dogs, we want to catch them in their primary socialization and habituation period, which is up to 16 weeks. Everything they learn before that, they consider safe and fine and happy, and life is wonderful. With cats, unfortunately, that window period is significantly shorter. We have normally about 8 weeks, and then they're no longer used, or then they're not in their primary socialization period. So we can push that with younger kittens up to about 3 months, and that's normally the time where they're the most receptive to getting used to new things. So what I want to start off with, just to very briefly run through here, are some of the behavior problems that we commonly see when we're consulting with people. I'm going to start with dogs. The first rule of thumb that we always ask people to remember about their dogs is, just because you can force them into a car doesn't mean you should. That doesn't necessarily make it the kinder option. Unfortunately, one bad experience can create what we call a conditioned emotional response. And this is where the dog learns once off, this is a horrible place. I hate it when I'm in here. Every time you try and push me into this, I get more and more and more anxious, and it becomes a snowball effect. And obviously, the longer the problem has been in existence, the harder it is to deal with. So what we normally suggest to people, and I'll talk you through it in a second, is get them used to traveling in a car without forcing them. Get them used to the whole idea, the smell, the feeling, all of those kinds of things, and make sure that from the first moment that you put them in the car, it's a positive experience. The thing about conditioned emotional responses is that, unfortunately, like I said, it takes once, and every single time something bad happens following that, it reaffirms that this is not a nice place to be. Most people, when they're not used to traveling with their pets often, they only take them once a year, or if they're sick, they pop them in the car, they take them to the vet. Now, vets are lovely people and are usually just the most amazing people when it comes to treating animals. But for those of you who frequent dentists, it doesn't matter how nice the vet is. Sometimes when you hear that high-pitched noise about teeth being drilled, inevitably you get a little bit nervous. And so for animals, if they only go to the vet when they're sick, or they only go to the vet once a year for vaccinations, and that's the only time that they're in the car, that creates the association that I go to the place where I'm scared and I'm not used to it, and somebody pokes me with things, or I'm handled by people that I don't know and I'm not comfortable with. So it is very important to get them used to cars and trips to the vet from the day that you get them. And not just for treatment. Pop them in the car, drive them to the vet, pop them on the scale, give them a treat, back in the car, and off we go. So that they've got at least 10 to 15 good experiences for every unpleasant experience that they might have. Like Morné was saying, motion sickness can cause a big problem with animals. It only takes once getting sick in the car for your dog to learn that I don't like being in here, and it becomes a compound issue. So the more they get sick, the less they like being in the car, and it just snowballs like that. Some of the most common behavior problems that we see, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because they're pretty self-explanatory. Barking in the car. Now, barking in the car can be a good bark or a bad bark. It could be because the dog is stressed. It could be because he's anxious, but it could also be because he's really, really excited. Each of those have a different treatment protocol. In other words, how we deal with it. the worry about barking in the car often is that it becomes very distracting for the driver and it can get very loud. And obviously when we have people in cars driving, we want them to be as focused on the road as possible and not on the very loud noise behind them. We also see dogs that chase movement that's outside of the car. I actually had a client with a dog who did this. It was a Labrador. And the dog would get so excited about movement, Labrador cross. He would get so excited about movement outside and he would chase the movement. And he actually smashed his head against the glass and smashed the glass in the back of their car. Now, obviously, the risk of injury there is significant and the danger of muzzles getting injured when they smack their faces against the glass. So this is something that we try and teach people to discourage as quickly as possible. And then attention-seeking behaviors, things like licking your ear, trying to sit on your lap. I've helped people where the dogs were climbing in between the back and the front seats all the time as long as they were driving. Again, very dangerous, difficult for people to keep their attention focused on driving, especially when you're trying to get a border collie off your lap and, in the seat behind you. Oh, jumping out of windows. Oh my goodness. I get the absolute heebie-jeebies whenever I see people with dogs like this. And it's surprising how common it is. Please, 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 if you brake suddenly and your dog is perched on the window like this, or your window is open and your dog is sitting on your lap, if you brake suddenly, your dog is out the window. If there is a cat or something that your dog wants to chase and they jump out the window, they can do serious injury to themselves. So this is really a big problem that we try and deal with as soon as possible. When it comes to safe travel options in dogs, these are my personal favorites, so I might be a little bit biased. I work on the principle of as little damage and as little risk to the animal as possible. I like these if you've got a station wagon or an SUV where the dog is part of the interior of the car, so he gets the benefits of things like air conditioning or open windows from people, but he's in the back, he's safe, he can't jump through to the front. Travel crates, I'll talk to you a little bit about what we prefer from a safety perspective in a minute or so. But when you are using a travel crate, make sure that it is attached to a seatbelt, because the crate itself moving around and sliding, particularly if you have leather seats, can actually cause motion sickness in your pet. And that can then help to create an aversion to both the crate and the car. You get these kinds of things where it's a car mat that basically covers the seat. And a lot of people like that because it provides protection against hair and dirt and things like that. But just remember, if you're going to use something like this, the benefit obviously is it stops your dog from jumping through to the front, but you still need to attach a harness and attach that to a safety point to make sure that your dog is safe. And then these are, again, for cars that you fit into the boot from the back end, where the dog has enough space to move around and enough space to see and get air and all that without actually getting having any kind of risk of getting injured. And then there are 1,000,006 kinds of harnesses on the market. The big thing that I want to suggest here is make sure that the harness fits properly. If the harness is too loose or the harness is too tight, it either doesn't do its job or it's making the dog uncomfortable. And again, if the dog is uncomfortable, he might start to associate that with his car or his journey in the car. Make sure that when you put your harness on your dog, if you look at the top picture here in the right with the little white dog standing, you want to make sure that the lead is long enough that he can stand and he can move a little bit, but not so long that he can actually fall off the seat if you brake suddenly or if he tries to jump off the seat, because obviously then we're looking at risks of injury again. And one thing that we always tell people, under no circumstances at all must you ever, ever, ever put a restraining lead on a collar clipped to the dog. Because if your dog falls off the seat, or if you brake suddenly, or if something happened, there's always a risk of injury to the throat, which can be quite horrific. Things to avoid. I'm not a big fan of soft crates for the simple reason that if you are in an accident, heavens forbid, that crate offers absolutely no protection for your dog. So they might be nice from a comfort perspective, but from a safety perspective, they're not ideal. Things like having your dog on your shoulder, again, with the open window, it doesn't matter that your dog is on a lead, because if you break or if your dog jumps out the car, you've got a dog who's just been hung, which is unfortunately something that I have seen happen before. And then dogs with heads sticking out of windows. I know Morné touched on this as well, but I just want to add to it. Just be careful. Ideally, let them have enough space so that they can stick their noses out, but be careful of driving fast with your dog's head out the window, because obviously there's a risk of getting dust or sand or anything like that in their eyes. And then there's the risk of escaping or falling out. An absolute no for dogs, absolutely never, ever, ever. You should never leave your dog in a car unsupervised or supervised for that matter. If it's warm, even if you leave windows open, please just don't. It gets too hot too quickly and your dogs can die very quickly. Never let them sit on your lap when you're driving, because again, if you are in an accident or if you have to brake suddenly, your dog stands no chance. If you have an airbag in your car, if your airbag deploys while your dog is on your lap, the dog is probably going to get severely injured from that. I don't ever let them have choke chain. Look, I'm not a fan of choke chains at all. There are better ways to get things done. But remember that the choke chains work on the premise of tightening around the dog's neck. So please don't clip a choke chain on a lead and then tie the lead to the car, to the inside of the car, because again, that's a wonderful way to hang your dog, unfortunately. And then if you have a bucky, don't let them sit on the back of the bucky, even if they are tied to something, because from a safety perspective, it is just not, it's not safe. Too many dogs get flung off in accidents, or if the driver brakes suddenly, and it's not worth the effort. And then, of course, cats, because cats are rapidly becoming the pet of choice for a lot of people. So we have to take into consideration how to actually get them used to travel as well. Like I said, they're very different to dogs. They tend to not cope well with novelty or change unless they were taught to do so from a very young age. So the most common problems we see with cats is anxiety or actual fearful behavior. This might not necessarily be an outward display. Cats are very subtle and very stoic in their behavior, but that doesn't change the fact that they have a severe emotional response to fear and anxiety. If you have a cat who is terrified of traveling, they might not act out, but they're still going to experience that emotion. And every single time they're put in that situation, it can end up with a whole bunch of different behavioral fallouts, things like aggression, or the cat can shut down, or things like that. All of it is negative and unpleasant and unnecessary. Vocalization, if you have a cat and you've been in a car and your cat is not used to traveling, you will have been meowed to within an inch of your life. That is, again, it's indicative of an uncomfortable cat, but at the same time, it can also be very distracting for people who then tend to want to reassure their cat, and that distracts their attention from driving. Cats are masters at escaping, so make sure that if you put them in a crate, the crate is actually locked properly, or you've put a tie on or something that you can close it properly, because a lot of cats actually know how to open their cat carriers. And the last thing you want is in the middle of driving to find out that your cat is no longer in his carrier. For safe travel options for cats, we like the solid crates, because again, it's easy to keep them safe in it. It's a hard shell in case of an accident, and it can be fastened to the seatbelt, which makes it sturdy, and the cat won't actually feel like he's being flung about. When you're looking at traveling with a companion, look, cats, it's better to have them in their own crate unless they're really, really good friends. But the last thing you want is to put two cats into one crate and then find out that in the middle somewhere they stop liking each other and start fighting with each other. So better safe than sorry. Put them in their own crates, one cat per crate. Make sure that the crate is big enough to actually cater for everything that needs to happen, and then make sure obviously that there's a non-slip bed inside. We don't recommend soft crates. I've explained why already. Not recommended to have a cat on a harness loose or in a car like that, because cats are masters at escaping and they really can get out quickly, particularly if they're panicked. Absolute no for cats. Never let them hang out the window. Never let them be loose in the car while it's driving. Make sure that they're not on your lap. Rather keep them safe. I want to very briefly touch on preparing your cat for travel, because cats need to be acclimatized quite slowly. So when you get a crate, the best thing to do is make sure that you pop the crate in the house and just leave it. If you want to, you can spray something like Fairlyway on there just to help them to see the crate as something that is not scary, and just leave it alone. Let them sniff it, let them bunt it. Bunting is when your cat is rubbing his head against something that he now sees as being fine. Once they're comfortable with that, you can open the crate, leave it in the house, put a bed in, scatter some catnip inside. And once they start using it and they're comfortable with it, then you can progress to closing the door and then putting the travel crate in the car. From a getting them used to the car perspective, you want to make sure that the car is open under supervision only. The car is off, the car is open, and you're there to supervise. Let your cats explore the inside of the car, because that makes it a familiar place for them. And it's not just something that they only get put in when they're in the crate and the crate is closed. You can use products like Fairlyway or Earth Pets or Calm Ease. These are over-the-counter options, but if you're still not having any luck, then you need to chat to your vet about something a little bit more stronger and get in touch with a behaviorist who can help you. Very briefly going to look at the dog version of this, getting them used to the car. Get them in the car when the car is off and it's under supervision. Make them comfortable, teach them to lie there and enjoy themselves. Build positive and calm associations with being in the car. Once they're comfortable, you can start crate training. You start with crate training in the house where the door is open, the dog is fed in the crate, and that becomes a safe space for them. The crate ideally should be available all the time. Once they're comfortable in the crate, you can teach them that I'm going to put you in the crate with a chew toy, but I'm going to close the door. And that's the next step, is getting them used to being confined to the crate. Once the chew toy is finished, the dog gets out of the crate, and then you transfer the crate into the car and you repeat the process. With dogs, what you can do is make sure that your first few short trips end at a lovely destination where they get to sniff around and they get to have fun, because that will just make them a little bit more comfortable. Some basic traveling tips. Make sure that they're comfortable when you're traveling, depending on the distance, obviously. For longer journeys, make sure that they've got food and water available at stops. We recommend that if you're traveling for longer periods of time, that you stop every hour for a toileting break and a water break. Dogs must always be on lead. And for cats, obviously you can't fit a litter box into the crate and fit all of that in your car. So we suggest that you put the crate in the car with the cat with you. You close the doors, you close all the windows, make sure that there's aircon on that's blowing gently, not gale force, because then that might frighten the cat. Open the crate, let the cat have access to the litter box, let them stretch their legs a little bit, and then when you're finished and they've had some water, you pop them back in the crate, you secure the crate, then you can open the door and off you go. Always make sure that your pets have enough air when they're traveling without providing any kind of risk. Make sure that they've got collars on. For cats, you need to make sure that the collar has an emergency release in case the cat gets stuck. Make sure that the collar is not too tight, but also not too loose. The general rule of thumb is you want to fit 2 fingers loosely under the collar comfortably. Make sure that you check your pet's collars regularly. Make sure that there are updated information in terms of telephone numbers on the tag. Make sure that there are at least 2 contact numbers, and ideally, don't put your pet's name on the tag. And the reason why we suggest that is because, unfortunately, theft happens. And it's better if you know your dog's name, but somebody has your contact number to get a hold of you, so that if there is ever an ownership dispute between 2 people and a dog, and this has actually happened a couple of times, if you call your dog's name, or if somebody calls your dog's name, your dog is going to go to them. So it's better than just to not to have your dog's name on, so that if there is a situation like this, you can call your dog and your dog will come to you. Microchipping is a must, absolutely. Make sure that you have your pet microchipped and keep the details up to date. Make sure that you always have a spare lead and collar and harness per pet, and poop packets, please. And then in case of an accident, it's not something we ever want to think of, but it does happen. Make sure that your details are up to date. Make sure that you have clear, up-to-date photos of your pet with you at all times, specifically any that show distinguishing markings in case they get lost. It's always a good idea to have a first aid kit, and these are places that you can find them. Make sure you have an in case of emergency card with all your contact details on, and make sure that those are updated. Any special needs, anything like that is popped on there, and then have lots of fun and travel with your companion.
Karin, thank you. And just listening to some of the, or looking at the questions posed, I sincerely hope that our audience will feel free to ask those, because it's amazing. There are a number of people who love their pets. I was just sharing an experience last October, out Bay, around the circle there, car in front, saw an animal fly out the window, a young Jack Russell. Fortunately had a name or the contact details. But you know, it was actually quite surprising. We got hold of the owner literally 5 minutes later, and they didn't even know that the pet had escaped from the car. You know, it's really sad, but we trust that's the exception and not the rule. Just a reminder, please, what we're getting from Morné. So thanks, Karin. You kindly assisted with some information and a prize, so we really look forward to that. Please, there's a course that's available. It's a gift voucher to one of their courses, so thank you in anticipation. All the processes to get it are out there. We will share those with you at the end. And then, of course, from Morné, there's a Rhodes hamper, which you must go and collect it in Somerset, which, by the way, if you don't like it, we'll collect it or ask Karin to do it. Now we move over to Wendy Collinson. Wendy is the Wildlife and Transport Program Manager for EWT, and she's talking to us about drivers engaging with wildlife. By the way, I love your colors, red and black. Thanks, Wendy. Over to you. You had it right and you've changed it.
Thanks, Eugene. Okay, good morning, everybody. And Eugene, thank you for the welcome and also for the invite. You know me, I'm always happy to talk about the work that we're doing, so very excited to be giving the presentation. It's a little bit different to Morné and Karin's presentation in that we are going to talk about wildlife and how we can make the roads safer for all users, so not just us as human beings, but also what we can do when we are driving on the roads and we encounter wildlife. So just to give you a quick background, I work for the Endangered Wildlife Trust, which is a South African conservation NGO. We have been going since 1973, and we have 3 pillars where we are looking at saving species, saving habitats, and also benefiting people. My role at the Endangered Wildlife Trust is to manage the Wildlife and Transport Programme. And as it suggests, we are primarily concerned with wildlife and involving all forms of transportation. So roads, railways, aircraft, freight on our roads, and also marine and coastal shipping. Now, it's not rocket science. We know we need transportation. It's critical for us to get from A to B, and it's also critical for our economy. We need to transport these goods and also people as well. So from that angle, it's a positive spin, but there are negative consequences for wildlife. Some of these images display the negative consequences, whereby there's collisions with aircraft, collisions with trains, and also the vehicle emissions that come off cars. So, for example, oil emissions, air pollution, and noise pollution to that as well. So there are consequences for us as well. So in addition to wildlife being killed on roads and effectively becoming a roadkill, the consequences for us when we are involved in a collision with some of these animals is about 1.5 billion a year being spent on accident insurance claims. Around 45 people die each year on our roads, and approximately 1 million animals per day die on our highways. And of these 45 people that die on the roads each day, approximately a third of them are involved with a collision with an animal. So, quick question to you all. How many of you have been in a vehicle when you have either as the passenger or the driver collided with an animal? So I'm sure some of you are thinking that, yes, you've hit something. And then I would imagine there's a fair number of you who are actually thinking, no, that's never happened to me. But let's just ask that question again and think about what we mean by a collision. I think most of us would categorize this as something large. So maybe you've hit an antelope, you've hit a warthog, an owl that's caused damage to your vehicle or even injured you. But what about the smaller animals that we don't necessarily notice that we've hit them, or even know that there's been damage to the vehicle? So just think about that again. How many of you have hit maybe small frogs on the road or small birds that haven't necessarily caused any damage, but it's still actually a roadkill? So I'm sure that now includes all of us, and some of you, I'd imagine, have had quite serious incidents involving wildlife on the roads. So at the Endangered Wildlife Trust, we are undertaking research across the entire country to try and understand a little bit of what is going on our roads, how many animals are really being hit on our roads each day, and therefore how we can improve the human safety and what we can actually do to prevent animals being killed on the roads. So in order to understand the problem, we are collecting roadkill data, and we use a combination of experts and volunteers for this. So many of you, when you've driven on the highways, you will have seen some of the route patrol teams who drive up and down the highways. If we break down, they often help us with our vehicle. But what some of you probably don't know is these guys have been trained in how to collect roadkill data for us. So if they see any animal on the road, big or small, they will stop, they will pull over, and they will record that information for us. We also have members of the public who help us with this. And of course, I should emphasise that when members of the public take part in gathering information for us, they only ever stop when it's safe to do so that they don't actually create a hazard for themselves. And in order for members of the public to help us, we have designed a cell phone app called Roadwatch, which enables you to record any dead animal on the road. And this all goes into a database which looks a little bit like this. This is a map of southern Africa, and it shows all the roadkill reports that have been sent to us. Now, some of the roads are highways, and you can see that there's lots and lots of reports. And I just want to emphasise, this is reports. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is where most roadkill is happening. So, for example, if we look over into the Northern Cape, it looks like there's no animals being killed on the roads whatsoever. But we do know that these roads aren't heavily utilised, so potentially there's not many reports coming in. Most of our reports come from around Gauteng, KZN, and the Free State. So this is the information that we have, and we have information about what animals are being killed on the roads and whereabouts. So this then leads us on to the question of, so what do we do about it? What do we do to prevent animals from being killed, and also improving our safety so that we can travel on the roads knowing that we're not going to collide with an animal? So many of you would have seen these on our roads. These are underpasses that go underneath the road and storm drains that are natural or man-made water courses to drain water from off the roads or for water passage to go under the roads. These are man-made structures for the purpose of engineering on any road. But what we've started to find is that animals often use these underpasses to cross the road. And these are some examples of what we found as evidence. You can see animal spoor or footprints here, and the image on the right, I wonder how many of you can guess what animal this comes from, but it's a porcupine quill. And we found evidence of these around the entrance to some of the stormwater drains. So we know that animals, or some of them, to prevent crossing the road and becoming a roadkill, animals are becoming quite savvy and learning how to use these underpasses to cross. This is also happening in other countries, so it's not unique to South Africa. Here's an evidence from the United States, where we have deer crossing beneath an underpass. And this is from our own continent in Africa. This was an underpass that was on the Mombasa Highway in Kenya, specifically built for elephants that had been crossing the road, and obviously to their demise, some of them were being killed, and also occupants of vehicles were being injured or killed. And this is known as an elephant underpass. So we can see here that the elephants are actually using the underpass to cross the road safely. And then there's other examples. And here we have cattle using an underpass. Penguins, this one is actually in New Zealand, penguins crossing the road. And various other species. We even get some birds flying through the tunnels as well. Now, how do we know this information? And this is just giving you a little bit of behind the scenes research that we do. We actually install camera traps in these tunnels to assist us with understanding and learning what animals use these underpasses. Now, for those of you who don't know what a camera trap is, it's a device that is a camera that's triggered by motion. So every time you walk in front of it or there's a movement in front of it, it has a sensor and it will take a picture of what is happening. Sometimes it can be really frustrating because they're very sensitive and they can take pictures of grass moving. So you end up with 40,000 of images, and 36,000 of them can be just of a blade of grass moving backwards and forwards. So it does have its challenges at times. But these are some of the images that we found on our highways of wildlife using the underpasses. So here we have a barn swallow, guinea fowl, mongoose, and even serval. We've also had porcupine moving through the tunnels. And this one image of a serval, we can just see its spot pattern in its body. But serval, we know are one of the top species for actually being killed on roads, along with guinea fowl and many other bird species as well. These are also some other examples of how animals cross the road. We don't actually have any of these in South Africa, but the hope is that we do have them one day. These are overpasses. So animals on one side of the road can cross to another in their natural habitat. You'll see the image in the top left. It's a bridge and it has vegetation on the top. So the animals believe that they are still in their habitat and that it's safe for them to cross. So these are some other examples of how animals get across the road safely. And when we use it with fencing, so here's an example here of an underpass with fencing by the entrance that effectively funnels the animal through, it then keeps them off the road, prevents roadkill, and ultimately makes it safer for us. So not only is it a win-win for the animal because we're preventing roadkill, but it's a win-win for the drivers as well. So I've talked a little bit about animals being killed on roads and some of these solutions that we have from an engineering perspective to prevent animals from crossing the roads. But we know that it's not always possible to prevent a collision, particularly when it's a large animal on the road. But there are other ways that we as human beings can adapt change and improve our driving behaviour to make sure that we aren't involved with an animal on the road. So here's a few key safety points for you when you're driving. So very often we see on the roads these red triangles with a silhouette of an animal inside, which is warning us to the presence of wildlife in the area. Unfortunately, the image that we see most of the time on these red triangles is an image of a kudu, which therefore makes people assume that it's just antelope in the area. That sign is there for a reason, and it's telling us that it's all wildlife. So don't just assume that it's a deer. It could mean any form of wildlife. And whilst you are driving, and this goes without saying, and we're all guilty, try to minimise your distractions. So if you're eating, if there's passengers talking to you, using your cell phone, which is a big no-no, but we are often guilty of this, make sure you've got your full attention on the road so that you can spot any approaching animals in your peripheral vision. And also get into the habit of scanning the roadside as you drive, particularly where the vegetation close to the road is very thick, or you can see water close to the road. If there's water, then very often you will find an animal or animals drinking there and then potentially wanting to cross the road afterwards. And of course, if you do see one animal by the road, you should expect that there may be others. Very often the larger antelope species will travel in pairs or herds, and certainly a lot of the smaller animals as well. And this isn't just protected areas. I'm sure a number of you are thinking, oh, why would we see kudu on our roads, for example? Well, we do, because we know that a number of landowners, even though their property is fenced, they do own wildlife. And certainly in the more rural areas, there are livestock as well to contend with. More safety points. If it does happen and there is an animal in your path, make sure you brake, but try not to swerve, because then this can potentially force you into the path of ongoing traffic. If possible, do a series of short bursts with your horn to frighten it away. And if possible, slow down. And if possible, then steer around the animal. But of course, you need to watch for oncoming traffic. And if a collision seems inevitable, try and maintain control of the vehicle. If there is a collision, ensure that you report it to the police and your insurance company. And if you hit or injure an animal, try and call your nearest rehabilitation centre, the SPCA, and be careful of handling the potential dangerous animal yourself. Rather, stay in your vehicle. If necessary, the route patrol staff that are often on the roads will assist you with this. And one big no-no is throwing scraps out of the vehicle, food scraps. Very often, because we are very environmentally conscious, we often think that throwing a banana skin out the window is fine because it's biodegradable. It's not rubbish that's going to pollute the environment. It might not necessarily pollute the environment, but it does encourage wildlife and other animals to come closer to the road and feed on it. So rather than throw food scraps or rubbish out of the window, rather keep it in the vehicle until you can dispose of it when you get home. And if you would like to help us with gathering some of our road mortality data, then you can download our cell phone app, which is called Roadwatch. You simply go to the Google Play Store. It's very simple to use. You enter in your details and then you can start recording, and all that information comes through to us. And you are effectively helping to make a difference on our country's roads by not only helping us with understanding what animals are being killed most often, but ultimately leading to potential solutions of how we can prevent it happening and making it safer for both animals and humans alike. So thank you for listening to my presentation. If anyone would like to contact me directly, this is my email address, and I'm looking forward to questions at the end. Thanks, Eugene.
Wendy, thank you. As always, it's fascinating, and I do trust that all of our participants here today share your passion and some of our duty of care. And yes, please, questions afterwards, but I'm pretty certain that everybody will feel free, all the participants, that if we can't get to their own questions now, we will just forward them and we will answer them. So thanks again, Wendy. We look forward to the next time we get together. Our next session has been handled by Mandla Ndlovu. He's head of training at the SA Guide Dog Association. And I must just tell you folks, really, when we were doing the trial run, it was absolutely fascinating what Mandla shared with us. And I do trust that you will feel as enamored about his presentation as what I heard, what I felt when I heard it yesterday. So Mandla, please talk us through this. Just a reminder, of course, that we are partners with the association because we believe in their core values. And if we can assist them in any way, we do so. Just a brief sell. Remember, with Wendy giving advice, the training programs that we run from a driving point of view talk to those issues. So you're welcome to engage with us. Mandla, we look forward to hearing from you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. All what I'm going to talk about is taking care of one. Can you hear me, Eugene?
Yes, loud and clear, and your screen is live, so thank you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. I'm going to be, as I've said, I'm going to be talking about assistance dogs and pets while traveling. We will all agree that puppy socialization it's important for shaping our dogs to be assistance dogs. For them to be able to go through this program of socialization, there is a comprehensive work that we have to do as an association just to prepare them for that. The dog's formative first months are important because all what we want the dog to do is to be able to get used to its environment, the sounds, the sights of everyday life, because that is important for the puppy's future life as an assistant dog. We make sure that our puppies get used to socialized to car traveling. And when we talk car traveling, it's not only your sedan or your hatchback. So we try and expose them to different forms of car traveling. I know that Morné and Karin have touched on the subject of car traveling. And then for us, we follow the same principle because these dogs, they're going to be spending a lot of their life, traveling in different cars. So what our puppy raisers are doing to socialize these dogs, they need to take these dogs to different, or our puppies, to different places, which is, an end goal. And then the most important thing is to be in a car, and then that is part of our socialization. The safest place to put the dog in, the puppy in, it's at the back of the car, preferably, and then if the puppy is still new and then it's not, settling, you might need another person to be there to assist you. Because we want, like Karin has said, to make it, pleasurable for the dogs because they're going to be spending the rest of their lives, traveling with guide dog owners and autism support dog owners, service dog owners. They've got cars. And then the important thing is introducing your dog to car traveling. So in other words, the dog needs to be introduced, positive association to the car. And then the most important thing is that the first few sessions shouldn't be like, okay, you into the car and then we're driving. You need to condition the dog and create a positive association. And then we're feeding the dog in the car before we even drive. Once the dog has settled and giving us that feedback that I'm happy to be in this car, then we can start like doing your short trips to the park, because we might want to create like a positive association that, like they have said, the previous speakers have said, that it's not about you are in the car and then we're taking you to the vet. So we will take our dogs to the park to create that positive association. Another most important thing for us, for our dogs, we want to like shape their behavior to that of a working dog or an assistance dog. So anything we do, we don't want them onto their car seat or to be playing inside the car. They should be in a stable place, in a position, and then they need to be kept there. And then if possible, you can give them a toy to chew. Some puppies might be like, whining, needing your attention. And then if you want to give in to that, then your puppy will be training you to do that all the time, of which the guide dog owner will not be able to do that. So the important thing is we need to be consistent with everything that we do, because we don't want to create mistakes and then end up having a dog that needs to be, withdrawn from our training. As I've said, these dogs, our puppies get socialized to different modes of transport, from your own car, your sedan, buses, and also the Gautrain. Once these dogs, they turn a year old, or 12 months to 16 months, they are ready to come into training, to start on their formal training. When they are for their formal training, one of the things that we do is to prepare them for traffic training. And then the objectives of traffic training, which is our end goal, is that we want our dog to be able to like have some experience with the vehicles, knowing what to do when they see a vehicle, knowing that they need to have like a safety zone, which is protecting themselves and the guide dog owner. And they need to have that confidence that they stop facing the line of travel, because that is important for a blind person, that they are still on their straight line. And then one of the things that the dogs need to have is to have that confidence to say, I'm not going because there is a car. For the first time, they will be doing what we call intelligent disobedience, where they will say, even though you are a partner, which is the handler of the dog. If you say, hop up, let's go, the dog will just like refuse to respond to that, because there is a vehicle in front of the dog, and then the dog cannot go anywhere. Once the dogs, they come into the dog's space, then our dogs, we are teaching them to go back a little bit, to take a step back, and the guide dog owner or the handler will go back with the dog. The introduction to traffic, it's important that for the safety of the dog and that of the driver, we are choosing our environments carefully, that we don't target or we don't go to areas where there's a large traffic flow, So we will go to areas that are quiet. And then the traffic condition needs also to be important. It's also important because what we want to do is we don't want to go to an environment where it's going to be hot for the dogs, because they need to be able to stop and wait for the car, to drive or to move, so that they can continue going forward. So for us as the trainers, what we do, we use collar cues. We use also, our body to help the dog understand exactly what the dog needs to do. So there will be, instructor giving all the answers that, okay, here is a car, you need to stop. Okay, here is a car coming towards us, then you need to back away. So all of this, what we are doing, we're trying to sort of trigger that natural instinct in a dog of protecting itself when it sees a car coming. And then we are preparing them for the future, because we know that there's people that are driving recklessly. So if a dog sees a car coming, then they need to protect themselves first. And then when they do that, they also protect the person that is handling them. In this case, it will be a blind person. As you can see in this picture, the dog is at a down cap. A down cap is it's a step down before crossing the road. You can see that the dog is looking around if it's safe to do whatever that the handler is going to cue the dog to do, which is a brilliant thing for our dogs to do. Traffic safety behavior training. All what we want our dogs to do is, to protect themselves, as I've said, and the handler. And we're giving them more experience of what is happening in real life, with the drivers out there. So we will be doing a lot of things that are choreographed, but not dangerous for the dogs. So the driver of the car and the handler of the dog will be, very experienced and qualified guide dog trainers. And then what we also do is we just to create awareness. We also do a little bit of making the car to touch the dog a little bit, but not in a dangerous way that maybe the dog will get a major fright. And then as well, we are also working on the dog's sensitivity. It's important that we do things like that because we want to heighten the dog's awareness of what might happen there. Because if we don't do these things, then it's easy for the dog to think that, nothing is going to happen. So to be aware of what's happening around it is crucial. The final traffic training is important because once we have done it, then we know when we're driving, when we see the dog responding to its environment, looking at the car coming and then making its decision and then ignoring the cue from the handler, then we will know that this dog will be ready to go out and assist a person that has a visual impairment. The important thing is that, the cars of today, their engines are so silent, and then it's easy for a guide dog owner to, give a dog a cue and expect a dog to move forward. So that is why we're preparing our dogs with this traffic session, so that there is a fail-safe method in case a guide dog owner makes a mistake. The dog will just flatly refuse to go. Why they do that? They are protecting themselves. When they protect themselves, they're also protecting the guide dog owner. And the guide dog owner is not going to force the dog to move forward because they trust their dog and then they know what their dog is doing. And then one of the most important things that we advise our guide dog owners is that they are not going to be practicing a traffic session situation that is going to make them to be moving into the middle of the road. So all they have to do to reinforce the behavior that we have taught the dogs, it's more a management kind of a situation that reinforces the behavior that has been taught, is to do it where they are safe, when they are standing at a down cap, which is the step down before crossing the road. Challenges that we are experiencing together with our guide dog owners or our dog users. I'm talking autism support dogs for children that are autistic, service dogs for people that are in wheelchairs, and guide dogs. As long as they are with the dog, there is a problem of access. Let's talk about if maybe they are using Uber, they are using a Gautrain. If you go into a Gautrain, people that are sitting next to you, sometimes they will be screaming, wanting to move away from your dog. They will say, oh no, your dog is vicious. Why is it the dog wearing so many equipment around it? Is it because the dog is dangerous? It's going to bite me. I don't want your dog near me. So all of these things, some of them it's because of our experiences as different people in our society. Some of them it's lack of understanding, and some it's religious reasons, because we will think, okay, dogs are not clean, But when we've got an opportunity as guide dog trainers or instructors, then we are always willing to want to educate. but it's not easy to educate somebody that is scared of a dog who doesn't want to come to you. So the advice that we're giving to people that are acting like that or responding like that, what we do is, to educate them, to tell them about the processes that our dogs go through, your breeding, the temperament that we choose, how they are socialized, the health of the dog, they are nice and clean, and they are meeting, also important that maybe if you're scared, you meet the guide dog owner or the user of the dog before maybe you go undertake that destination where you're going to. And then if you're scared of a dog or the dog is with you and you are a dog lover, it's always important to ignore the dog. And then always, like I'm saying, it's always better to work with a person that is scared of a dog if they are willing to learn. For these dogs to behave so beautifully, it's because of, the breeding that we are following as an organization. So our breeding, we don't just breed any dog. We breed from selected stock that are free of, your health problems. And then what we give them is nice food. And then also the whelping, when it's time for them to whelp for the broods that we have here on as our breeding stock. The whelping, which is, giving birth, it happens when the puppy or maybe the brood, it's 63 around 63 days, but it can also happen from 56 days. That is giving birth, and then they are giving birth on site. On our premise, we've got a puppy block, and then once the puppies are 21 days old, then we can start socializing them. We bring visitors to talk to them, to touch them. We take them for a short drive just to get used to different things. And then once they are 7 to 8 weeks of age, we place them with our puppy raisers. Puppy raisers are volunteers that are, they are a backbone of our organization because the work they do is preventing our puppies from being kennelled. And then one of the things that they do is socializing our puppies to car traveling. Those are volunteers. And then once the dog, they are 12 to 16 weeks or months old, they come in for their formal training. And one of the things that we teach them is to behave when they are in the car. And they're not jumping up and down in between seats. They know where they need to stay because that is where they've been socialized or trained to do. And then they are not looking out the window, which is something that we always discourage for the reasons that Karin and Morné have alluded to. Once the dogs are ready, and then we can match them with our clients. Our clients will come undertake a training, which is a 3 weeks course, and another week of settling the dog and the person that have been trained in their environment, doing routes that they will want to do with their dogs. And then once we've done the training, then it's going to be the graduation. When I say graduation, it's when the person that has come, that has been trained with one of our dogs, have kind of passed the training cycle or the training program, and then they are free to go with their dogs. And then we will do what we call an aftercare, which is something that I've already mentioned, that we're settling the dog and the person in their own home environment. An important thing for me to note is that if the members of the public, they see a working dog in its uniform, they mustn't distract the dog. They mustn't want to pet the dog. They mustn't want to feed the dog as well. And then also, if you are a member of the public traveling with your dog or walking in the streets with your dog, when you see a guide dog owner approaching or a dog that is or an assistant dog, my request to you is if you can bring your dog on a leash, under control, and then move it away from the dog that is working, because a person that is using a guide dog, an autism support dog, or a service dog, they are relying so much on this dog's focus. Once this dog sees another dog, or this other dog is distracting this dog, then the safety of the handler of that dog is put at risk, which is something that we see most in our training. And then also, if you see a guide dog owner standing on the down curb, don't hoot at them, because they are listening to make sure that the traffic is safe before they can ask their dog to go forward. Don't come out of your car or hoot to grab them maybe across. Just give them that opportunity to do what they've been trained to do, unless if they ask for help, then you can assist them. They can ask for help, and it's not a problem for them to ask for help if the traffic or the area where they are crossing, it's difficult. Thank you very much.
Well, guys, don't you feel like applauding the work that Mandla and his team do? I know for myself that one of the things that we probably take for granted is the benefit of sight. Here is a tool and an instrument that can help people who are challenged. And I think quite probably all of us as motorists and as drivers will think twice about what we do when we see a person with a guide dog, or for that matter, that may have a white cane. Let's be kind and show a duty of care to them. Just by the way, a couple of things. The Guide Dog Association, we're talking about taking sight for granted. We had the PR Peter at one of our performance driving events the other day, and now he's blind, he's visually impaired. And we put him behind the wheel of a Ford Mustang, and we put him on the track. And I wish you could have heard the comments that he made. I think we'll keep him away from your dogs now, all right, Mandla, because he's going too fast, all right? Just a reminder, please, if you want to know what it's like, Mandla and the organization, there's 2 tickets to the open day that will be on offer, the instructions how to claim it. And then there's also one, and I really found this interesting, one entrance to spend the day with a guide dog trainer, shadowing as well as working under blindfold with one of their dogs. So if you don't know what it's like to be visually impaired, go along, put a blindfold on, and let's see what happens. Again, Mandla, thank you. Please stay around, because we want you to field some questions for us afterwards. Now, the man that took Peter out in this V8 Mustang is Derek Kirby. He is our training director. So please, he looks a bit nuts for doing that, but he's got some good sage advice for us. Derek, please.
Thank you, Eugene, and welcome to everyone joining us. So basically, my presentation, a lot of the other presenters have touched on a few of the things. I'm going to obviously touch on it from a perspective of, road safety, as well as being a first responder and a voluntary paramedic. So, for example, a lot of the time we've spoken about in the previous presenters about dog harnesses, etc. From a perspective of training, just imagine your pet wasn't secured in the back of the vehicle with one of these pet harnesses. There you can see the images of a small medium dog. Let's say, for example, the dog weighs in excess of about 7 kilos. In a collision, that dog is 30 times its weight. That's physics. That's exactly what the dog does. So a 7-kilo dog will probably land up being about 210 kilograms. Now, you must imagine that dog unsecured in the back of the seat. That dog is flying towards you as a driver or you as a passenger. So it's a piece of mass that's coming to you, and like I said, weighing 210. If we look at one of your bigger dogs, and some of the dogs that we have, for example, Rottweilers, Great Danes, and that, they could weigh up to about 55 kilos. Now imagine that times 30. That's over 1.5 tons of dog coming towards you. So not only will the dog be injured, but again, either the driver or passenger will be injured with that dog. Now, a lot of the times when we get to collision scenes, the unfortunate thing is that we do attend collisions where there are pets involved, be it big dogs, some cats we've been to, etc. And, we find these things happening in the vehicle. Now, again, what we basically want to do is make sure that you've got the correct harness so we don't have this. Again, don't compromise on cost. A lot of the time we go to a pet shop, we look at the harness and we go, that will do, it fits all right. That's not, it's perfect, we can use it. So don't compromise on cost. Again, get your pet used to the harness from a puppy, as the previous speakers mentioned. so that it is very comfortable using the harness. Now, overseas, we unfortunately don't do it in South Africa, but the Center for Pet Safety overseas, they take it very serious with regard to pet harnesses and pet safety in vehicles. And what they do is they actually test harnesses, they test crates, etc. in the vehicles as much as they would test a car restraint. So I'll show you a short video clip of the cheaper versions of harnesses and what these, sort of boxes in the back of vehicles can do. Because most of the time people assume, well, let's put the pet in a nice box, secure it with a seatbelt, but you'll see from the video what I'm actually meaning about these things compromising the vehicle or the safety in the vehicle. Right, so let's just watch this video clip. Right, so you can see there, the harness is in place, it is secured, but as you can see, the vehicle, sudden stop, and unfortunately some of the boxes, some of the soft carriers, etc., can cause damage, if not, as you can see, runs off the actual seat. Right, and there's that weight transfer that I was speaking about. Remember, if the dog's 15 kilograms, that lands up being 450 kilograms in a collision. Right, so you can just see there the devastation of what happens to the pet, even in the harness, etc. So again, we've got to take into consideration, when we're traveling with a pet, to drive even safer than we normally would. Now, this happened about 2 years ago. As paramedics, we take any life into consideration, being human or pet. And you can see from the image, it was quite a big dog involved in the collision. Unfortunately, the dog did not survive and succumb to its injuries. But this was because it was being transported with a trailer filled with wood, etc. And it was involved in the collision. So we do try and save any life. And again, if that dog was probably in the correct restraints, dog harness, etc., we might not have had to, unfortunately, declare the dog dead on scene. So we do definitely try help. And again, in addition to collisions involve dogs, we have been to a collision where a vehicle did overturn. It was an entrapment, and part of the entrapment was dog bite injuries as well. So unfortunately, remember, even though it's your pet, the dog's in a massive amount of trauma in the collision. Its first reaction is, I need to get out of this vehicle. And unfortunately, the dog did bite the owner. So we had to treat the owner for dog bites. Right, again, we've touched on pet first aid. From the perspective of a paramedic, it's as important as first aid for a human. There are courses online that you can do. I found it quite amazing. I did a few pet first aid courses, and I always try and bring in my paramedic knowledge into pets. And clearly, Morné will correct me and say, Derek, it's not a human, it's a pet. So things change. And yes, CPR is completely different on a pet as it would be for a human. So it's worthwhile investigating one of those CPR courses online. A vet, again, invest in a quality first aid kit for home and travel. A lot of the time we try and use human first aid kits and equipment for your pets. And there are specific things that obviously are made for pets. So rather invest in a first aid kit for pets. Right, just like any other first aid kit, make sure that it's obviously stocked. So if you do use something out of it, make sure you replenish it. And like I said, specifically to a pet, right? So don't try and use human medication and ointments on your pets. Right, that's me in a nutshell. I just want to leave you with one very nice quote. There in the corner, the best therapist has fur and 4 legs. And thank you so much.
Derek, thank you very much. And I must just tell you, I suppose I don't tell you often enough, I really admire the work that you do in responding to other people's challenges. And many of the things that they do is through their own stupidity. Unfortunately, then it takes folks like you to deal with that in their own time as volunteers. But it's so nice and refreshing to see that we see life as important. It's not just human life, it's all life. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, over there. We will field them. This brings us now to question time. If I can just, there's a fair amount of questions, folks. So I'm just going to try and field one from each speaker in the meantime, and then we'll go back to a second if possible. Karin, can we have you up, please? The question to you: if a dog is badly behaved in the car, can I use punishment to stop him misbehaving? Karin, you want to put your video on, and in fact, Morné, Mandla, and Wendy, if you would like to do that, please. So where is Karin? She's out disciplining her pets, eh? Okay, so let's just hang on a sec. Mandla, can I talk to you for a moment? You were the last one. What are the unique challenges that a person of color has when taking public transport when they encounter somebody with guide dogs? Please. Just unmute, please, Mandla. There we are.
Yeah. So the challenge that we are experiencing, because of fear, and lack of education, that is why you see a lot of them, when they see these dogs, see a guide dog, because a guide dog, you don't see a lot of them in the townships. Then they start screaming, running away from the dog. And then when you say the dog, they don't bite, they don't understand that, they think a dog is a dog, it's got teeth. It's going to bite, and all the equipment. And as I've said, it's very difficult to educate somebody that is running away, screaming because of, their phobia. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing. I won't say it's a cultural thing, but it's just like an individual's experience with dogs. But it's not all of them. It's just one or two of them that will be screaming, moving away from the dogs, because of, lack of experience and, of course, of education.
Mandla, just while we're with you, please, you shared with us the challenges that guide dog users have with regard to applications like Uber. I'm just using that as a general term. What are some of the problems that they have? The challenges that I've seen some kind of owners having, you will call for the Uber, but things have improved now. We've had a situation where a guide dog owner calls for an Uber, and then an Uber driver will be, they don't know who has called them. And I was with this guide dog owner, and she told me the registration of the car. So I saw a car coming, and the driver just stopped at a distance, looking at the lady with the dog. And then instead of going to the lady to pick her up, he decided just to drive away, or to drive off, and leaving the lady there. Then I had to take the lady physically, sighted guide, because it was not far from where she lives. And we crossed, and then she used the guide dog all the way back to her house. So that is a problem where people, they are scared of dogs. And they don't want dogs in their car because they think that the dog is dirty, the dog is not healthy, it might transfer a rabies onto them, but our dogs are healthy. They don't carry any of those diseases because we vaccinate them against all the, the viruses that are out there. Thanks, Mandla. Wendy, Karin, the question where you disappeared for tea, coffee, lunch, or whatever it was you did. If my dog is badly behaved, the role of, can I use punishment to get them to become compliant?
So here's the thing. You could, but there are better ways to do it. And quite honestly, ways that are going to not damage the relationship that you have with your dog. That's the short answer.
Okay, thank you for exactly and Saxion. Wendy, to you, how do you feel about these animal whistles that can be fitted to vehicles?
That's a great question. And yeah, there's been quite a bit of research done on these whistles. Often they're called deer whistles. For those of you who don't know, it's a device that you can fit to the front of your vehicle, and the air whooshes through it and emits a whistling sound, and is supposed to scare animals on the roadside away. And they are fairly effective to start with, but then as time goes on, the animals become habituated to it so that the sound then doesn't scare them. and we're back to the same problem again. So my advice would be to be using them intermittently, so they're not on your vehicle all the time, and just use it occasionally, and then that's, you know, problem solved for a percentage of the time.
I guess it's like those guys that oranges on their car aerials. Didn't work. Yeah. Okay. Morné, can I ask you this about the use of human medication for pets?
Okay, so also a very, very important question, because look, the reality is that a lot of our medications that we do use have got either human versions or are actually human medications. But the biggest problem we face is that humans, cats, and dogs do not have the same metabolism. They don't have the same effects on the drugs. And there are a lot of human drugs, especially when we get into the psychosomatics and the anxieties, the drugs that actually affect the brain that you shouldn't use on your pet. So although you might go to the vet and you say, oh, but I know this drug, a drug has been chosen for a specific reason. And more than that, it has been given at the correct dose for your dog or your cat. And that is the biggest challenge we have, is that a person will take a whole tablet and they will give a whole tablet to a 2-kilogram Yorkie. So we often deal with massive drug overdoses because it's not understood that the dose is actually dependent on the weight and the size and the species. So we rather say, before you give any medication whatsoever, please just pick up the phone and ask. If it's something that can be safely given, we will say, yes, sure, give this much. If it's something that's not safe, we will say, please don't, rather bring them in so we can give something else.
Thanks. I was going to ask you about ivermectin, but let's leave that for another case. All right. Derek, please confirm the speed that body's mass is accelerated up to 30 times. Is it 60 kilometers an hour? Just so that everybody is aware of that. Just confirm that for us, please.
So that's a speed at 60 kilometers an hour when the vehicle comes to a sudden stop. So be it with a bridge pylon, etc., or another stationary vehicle, that any object in that vehicle will be accelerated by 30 times its weight. And in our case, with the pet, that weight is obviously accelerated as well. And that's a weight, if it's unrestrained, is flying forward to do damage and cause injury to passengers and drivers.
No. Can you imagine if it's the windscreen? Eh? I'm going to take two more questions. One, this is almost a general question. It's asked, in the event of somebody being arrested for some reason, drunken driving, I don't know, whatever, any idea what's happened to the pet in those cases? What would the procedure be by the arresting officer? Would the animal with the dog, and go into prison with him? What? Any comments on that, guys? Nobody knows.
I think I can answer. Sorry.
Okay, go for it.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
So I think most of those pets would be taken either to the local, because we would accept a pet like that, or they would normally be involved or taken to a local animal welfare, SPCA sort of situation. If they cannot get hold of a emergency contact or something like that.
Okay, and I guess it's beyond your ambit to euthanize the driver. Eh? No comment. Okay, let's one last question, and because I'd like a wrap up from every one of you. Mandla, why are Labradors the preferred choice of dogs? Unmute.
Well, Labradors are a preferred choice because of, their friendliness or character and their willingness to work. And the thing about Labrador is that they are also also loved by the general public. We've used German Shepherds in the past, and we're still using them, but not as much as your Labradors. When people see you walking with a Labrador, they always want to say hello to a Labrador because of his temperament, and then that willingness to please the handler. Yes, they do also have their disadvantages, because we all know that Labradors, they love food, and they can shed a lot of hair, which some people, they don't want dogs to have there. But besides that, the strong thing is They can be workaholic and they want to please, and their character of, being like loved by a public also plays a major role for us to use them as working dogs.
Great, thanks, Mandla. Just a note to everybody, this program is recorded. Everybody who's in attendance will get a link to it. And what I would suggest when you get that link, if you'd like any of your questions to be fielded by these experts over here, we'll deal with those over there. There's probably about 15 questions which we don't get around to asking. So please, before we hand over to Shani to give the prizes, just a wrap-up message from every one of you. Who would like to go first? Morné.
So yeah, thank you very much. And I think I can commend all the other speakers as well, that it was really a great presentations from everyone. And I think for me, the bottom line is that our pets are part of our families. And in just as you are looking after your child and looking after fellow travelers in the car, so we need to remember that our pets are also fellow travelers in the car. It's not just a box or some inanimate you've popped in there. So we need to also think of them, take their safety into consideration. And I think hopefully we got some really great advice today on how to do that.
Thanks. Let's get to Derek. You will notice that our attendance is not what it was for normal colloquiums. We don't know whether it was the subject or not, but I do trust that everybody who's been here, and I'm just looking at the comments, it's been phenomenal. So, a personal note of thanks to everybody. Derek, a concluding message from you?
Thanks, Eugene. And yeah, well done to all the presenters. Some interesting information coming out of there. I think the one tip I can give is, to limit the risk of being involved in a collision. Well, it's easy. Do one thing. Drive properly. And if you really don't know how to, at MasterDrive, we can teach you how to drive properly. So there you can come to us and we'll teach you.
I told you he had to sell it, or else he doesn't get paid at the end of the month if he doesn't. Wendy, please.
Thanks, Eugene. I guess my take-home message is to re-emphasise the app, which I see in the comments. Some people have already downloaded the roadkill app, and we might not necessarily be able to prevent every single roadkill, but it is about understanding what's going on. So, yes, I would encourage people to download the app and then they can help us. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And thanks for the good work that you guys do. Really appreciate it. Karin, a new thought to animal psychologists. Each one of them have been counseled, I gather, to a degree. So let's hear your final take.
The first thing that I want to say is thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time this morning. I can't believe I did that in 20 minutes. Normally it takes me much longer. But the biggest take-home message that I'd like everybody to have is there's always help available. If you have any problems that you're dealing with that you don't know how to cope with, you don't have to live with it forever and ever. And you certainly don't have to rehome your dog or your cat because of it. There are people who can help you, and we're always happy to do so.
Great, Karin, thank you. And then a final word from Mandla, please.
Thank you, Eugene. From me, I just want to thank you for inviting GDA, or Guide Dogs Association for the Blind. And then just to say to the general public, please, if I know it's hard, but please, if you see a guide dog, a service dog, or an autism support dog wearing its harness, it is always better for you, just to avoid the dog and let the dog to focus and do its work. Thank you very much.
Mandla, thank you very much, and for all the work that you guys do, and I think we take it for granted. Just remember, anybody who wants to participate, there's instructions on how you can find out about joining them. And before we hand over to Nishani to give away some prizes, please remember, guys, this is brought to you courtesy of MasterDrive. There's no costs incurred. We attempt to make it different by giving away prizes. So please, we appreciate any referrals and any moral support that you can give to us in these applications. And remember, for April, we'll be doing something special. You will be advised shortly. You'll get a save the date, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. We're now going to hand over to Nishani and her team. And by the way, thanks to those guys. They do an awesome work in the background to make sure that these things happen. So let's see who's won what. Thank you.
Thank you to Eugene and our really awesome presenters. And thank you to all that are in attendance for joining us for the 11th edition of the Virtual Colloquium. Now back to our prizes. This specific one that I'm going to start first with was open for 3 months on our last colloquium. So it's the International Diploma in Logistics and Transport, and this is valued at 34,100. This course will be delivered by Commerce Urge, and the winner of this prize is Sharon Poiner. Congratulations, Sharon. The second prize is a gift voucher to the COPE International AB course. Thank you, Karin, for donating this. The winner to this voucher is Madeleine Mason. The next 3 is the Auto Gymkhana Experiences. We have 3 winners for this, and that is Kathy Price, Mandy Beckley, and Louise Fitzel. So thank you. This will be sent to you, including the voucher. The following 3 prizes is where you will need to email us. I will quickly just share the information with you. This is the Rod's hamper from Cottage Vet Clinic. Thank you, Dr. Morné, for this. It includes a harness and a lead. Now, to enter for this prize, you will need to email Sam at MasterDrive with Rod's hamper as a subject line. And you will need to be able to collect this hamper in Gordons Bay, Cape Town. The second 2 is tickets to the SA Guide Dogs Association Open Day, and this is on Sunday, the 27th of February in Bryanston. Thank you to Tanya and Mandla for this prize. And those that are interested, you need to register your interest for this prize by emailing mandlan@guidedog.org.za. And the last one, which is really special, it's also an entrance to spend the day with a guide dog trainer. And this is where you will shadow as a working under blindfold with one of the dogs. And to register your interest for this prize, you also need to email mandlan@guidedog.org.za. We will also be emailing you the details for these prizes. The winners will be contacted by Sam and myself. And thank you to everyone for attending. Eugene, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, presenters. Thank you for those in attendance. And please, thank you for your support. We appreciate it. And if we can make a difference, let's do so. So let's just conclude the final wrap-up. Nishani will play the thank yous, and we will then see you on another occasion.